Well, good morning. It certainly is good to see everybody who is here today. I pulled up, I saw that van from Maud. Who's from Maud out there?
Well, we're from the home. They donated that to the Home of Recovery.
Okay, all right. So, well, I went to school at Martin's Mill, so we played basketball against Maud quite a bit back then. I thought, man, I'm back in high school. But I appreciate the prayer that was just led. You know, when we talked about this series of lessons, that was kind of the theme. You look around the country, in the world, and there's a lot of nonsense. I mean, what was it, about 10 days or so ago during the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, I guess the Olympic Committee thought it was a good idea to have a bunch of transgenders dress up, you know, and kind of recreate the Last Supper concept of the last meal that Christ had with his apostles there before his crucifixion that week. And just ridiculous stuff like that. You see the nonsense with what we've put up with Biden the last several years, Kamala, the brilliant person she is, the attempt on Trump's life about a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of stuff's up in the air. The stock market, is up and down. Cost of everything's going up. If you're not careful, the border, has been a problem now for many years, especially the last 3 or 4. So as a Christian, you sit there and you begin to think, well, what's going to happen? How bad's it going to get? Of course, we don't know. Time will tell as far as what the final result's going to be. But one thing the Bible does do, the Bible's prepared and God's prepared to help us get through whatever scenario we find ourselves in. So there's no surprises for God. There's no, situation too hard for him to get us through. When you think about the way the Bible is written, Romans 15 verse 4 says, the things written aforetime are written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the Scriptures might have hope. That means I should be able to look back at the Bible and see what God did there and pull from that strength to know how to act in the here and now. I gave an assignment just last week to the boys at school to go through the New Testament and to mark down at least 7 times in the New Testament where God uses a running history of the Old Testament as the outline for the New Testament preaching. And there's a bunch of them. The most prominent one is Acts chapter 7, the sermon that Stephen preaches, where he just walks them right through Jewish history all the way to where they are then. Hebrews chapter 11 is another one where you just go, hero of the faith, hero of the faith, hero of the faith, showing you and I how to be a hero of the faith, how to stand firm in hard times. You can't name a single Old Testament male or female who's a great man of God or a great woman of God whose story is about laying in a hammock drinking iced tea. That's not how you see greatness. That's not how your faith is tested. Even you and I, our faith is only tested when there is a temptation not to stay faithful, when there's pressure to give it up, when there's some other force putting on you not to do the right thing. I thought we would start this morning by looking at what I see as an ideal example of how we should react when things go sideways. And that would be by going to the book of Daniel and looking very briefly in our time we have this morning as far as we can get in these first 6 chapters of Daniel, because you have a scenario that parallels our own lives. It's so easy to get things out of proportion. Perhaps you've ever heard the definition. You know what the basic definition of minor surgery versus major surgery is? The surgery you're having is a minor surgery. The one I'm having is a major surgery. Well, that's how we are with life sometimes. We get the blues about how bad things are. I see a few gray heads out there. I know that Mackie is even older than I am. Y'all remember that show Hee Haw used to be on TV a long time ago? By the way, if you ever see Hee Haw now, that was a cheesy show. Wow. That is poorly done. But back in the 70s, it's all we had, I guess. So that was on TV. But there was a song, gloom, despair, and agony on me. Deep, dark depression, excessive misery. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Gloom, despair, and agony on me. Sometimes we're that way. Someone says, how you doing? Well, yeah, it's just not good. And perhaps you know some people, that's been their answer for 50 years. Every day should not be a bad day. Our outlook should not be that gloomy. Some folks are just so dark and pessimistic, they could brighten the room just by leaving the room. Well, that's not the kind of person you and I should be. And a lot of it has to do with perspective. Well, what you see in the greats, the great men of God, the great women of God, they are the same person every single day. Joseph was the same man in his father's house as he was a slave in Potiphar's house, as he was a prisoner in the prison of Egypt, as he was the prince or the prime minister, if you will, whatever term you like, there for Pharaoh. Now the question is, am I that way? Am I steady in my faith? Do I hold to the truth with conviction? Again, conviction is only tested during hard times. So as a child of God, we really shouldn't be praying for hard times. I mean for easy times. In James 1, we're told there that the trying of your faith brings patience. Therefore, when we pray to God, give me a stronger faith. Help me be a better Christian. You understand, in a sense, you're saying, God, just bring it on. Throw some trouble at me. Throw some problems at me. Throw some hardships at me. Let me get stronger by what I go through. If y'all haven't already started, you will very soon. 2 a day start this pretty quick. And they'll have the boys out there, and you'll run and you'll puke, and you'll run and you'll puke. And you lift so many weights, you go home at night, you got to brush your teeth like this. You hold the brush till and turn your head because you're so sore you can't even move your arms. You're not doing that because you love the heat and the cramps and the soreness. You're doing that because down the road, those towns are doing the same thing. And Friday night's going to be coming around pretty quick, and you're getting prepared for what comes next. What we're doing in Bible class right now, what you do here every Sunday and every Wednesday, you're lifting the weights. You're preparing for what happens when you step outside these doors. You're preparing for the trials of life that come our way. Some of y'all who are older, I used to read Ecclesiastes 12. I like verse 1. Remember that I created in the days of thy youth before the evil days come. But then you start reading verses 2 through about 12, and you read about the getting old process, about the hair turning white, the legs getting shaky, the teeth becoming few, the sound dropping, getting old. And it happens to all of us if we hang around here long enough. If you get up enough mornings in a row, before long, you'll be an old man or an old woman. That's how this works. And the Bible prepares me for that if I allow it to. So back to the book of Daniel. 3rd year of the king Jehoiakim, Babylon comes across, Nebuchadnezzar comes through and captures Jerusalem. He does it in 3 waves, really, but this is the first wave in 606. And they take back some prisoners, the goodly children, among whom is Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And the thought process there was this. If we come through this church house and we take one of your kids from every family or grandkids, and we take them prisoner, all of a sudden it becomes a little bit more difficult for you to rebel against me as king because there's an implied threat. If y'all get out of line, I'll take it out of your kids. They're either going to be tortured or murdered or both. So it was a way to control people. It was also a way to harvest talent. He's bringing in, these are smart kids. They've been educated. These are of the royal families of the Jews. They go to Babylon, and they are fed there from the food of the king's table. That's not an accident God says that. They're not being fed bologna and beans. They're being fed whatever the king is eating. This is good food. He's in the house of Arioch. They're in the house of the master of the eunuchs. I won't go into detail about what that is, but it's quite possible these young men suffered that indignity as well, becoming eunuchs there in that house. That's where they are whenever this story is introduced to us. They bring the food out, and there's something wrong with the food. Now, this is going to show you some great character of these 4 young men. I think it shows you character of their families as well. Usually good teenagers don't just pop up on their own. There's a mom and daddy somewhere. There's a grandma and grandpa somewhere. Someone had instilled in these kids, no matter where you are, no matter what circumstances you're under, you are expected to do the right thing. I mean, sometimes we set very, very low expectations for our children. And many times that's where they stay. We have high expectations. In sports, we expect them to get on varsity. We expect them to start. We expect them to succeed. We expect them to get their name in the paper, don't we? Do something at a high level. How about in the church? If we're not careful, we'll grill our kids over and over about their grades. What'd you make in math? What'd you make in science? Man, you got a B. We can't have a B. You can't get that scholarship to Texas or to A&M or to Texas Tech. I guess over here, maybe ETSU or what is that? That's my age showing. That's A&M at Commerce now, right? It was ETSU when I ran track there in high school, but nonetheless, we're in Commerce. But wherever you're going, we got to have a big GPA. Same kid. Do we ever even ask them about what they studied in Bible class? Do we as a parent know at what level of Bible learning and education our children are? I can tell you my kids' stats, basketball stats, how many points per game, how many rebounds, how many steals. How many times they, again, got on the front page of the newspaper? We know all that. How many times they went to state and track? How many times they did whatever? Do I know at what point my kid has learned the plan of salvation? Do I know at what point my kid knows the basics about the church? Do I know at what point my kid and how my kid thinks and processes about moral matters like alcohol and other drugs, like pornography, like gambling, like immodesty? Do I even have a clue? We should. It's a whole lot more important what they learn spiritually while going through our households than what they learn, whether they learn to throw a rise ball as a softball pitcher or a curve ball as a baseball pitcher or whatever the case may be. We've got to be very, very careful, brethren, to make sure that we instill in them this kind of courage. Could our kids be Daniels and Shadrachs and Meshachs and Abednegos? Now, if you actually are honest with yourself, you probably have a pretty good answer on that question. Or are you sure they'd stand up? These three do. The key verse to this entire book is Daniel 1 and verse 8 when it comes to their personal conviction. When they brought that food there, Daniel and his friends say, we're not going to eat it. Because Daniel had purposed in his heart not to defile himself with the king's meat. He was not going to sin against God. That's Acts chapter 5, when Peter and John had been arrested and they were told, y'all can't preach anymore about this Jesus. They went right back out and preached again. They brought them back in the next day. Didn't we tell y'all not to preach? To which Peter says, should we obey God or should we obey men? Friends, we bow before God and there the list ends. They weren't going to eat that food. They didn't eat that food. And they said, give us the test. Let us eat pulse. Let us eat vegetables for 10 days and drink water. Then you come back and look at us and see how we look. Now, to use good old East Texas language, when they came back 10 days later, they were fat and sassy compared to the rest. They were in better shape. They were in better condition physically than the other ones. Of course, God is blessing them, and he already was in favor with the captain of the guard. Christians should always be that way. You know, if you have the Christian attitudes, Matthew 5, 1 through 12 is not just a cute little poem to print out and stick above the commode in your bathroom. The Beatitudes are a charge from Jesus. You've got to have these mentalities. You've got to have these attitudes. A Christian should always have a good attitude. You know, in the book of Thessalonians, we're told, and 1 John as well, to when you work, you make a hand. Don't be an eye pleaser. You know what an eye pleaser is? You ever have employees that work for you? When the boss is around, they're making a hand. When the boss turns his back, they're sitting in the shade. That's an eye pleaser. The idea here is that's not a Christian. A yes sir, no sir attitude. As a man, as a woman, as a slave, as an owner, whatever your capacity is, you treat folks right. You practice the golden rule. You should be the best employee at the place you work. You should be the best employee that your boss man has. If you're a boss, you ought to be the best. Are we in Franklin County here or are we in Titus County? Which one? Franklin. You ought to be the best employer in Titus County. Everybody should want to work for you. I just said Titus again anyway, didn't I? Franklin County. Guys, I'm on a lot of medication. I'm about to lose my voice. I'm drugged up this morning. All right. The point is, Daniel, obviously, if I had been taken prisoner from my house, I had watched my city militarily destroyed and whipped, and maybe my parents killed and my buddies murdered, and I've been walked 400 miles on foot in chains over to Shiner, and I perhaps had been emasculated in the sense of becoming a eunuch in that house, I don't know that I would have had the conviction of heart to have been concerned about what was on the table. Apparently the rest of the Jews didn't care. Sometimes that's how we think, isn't it? You think I care? I don't care if it's bacon. I'm going to eat me some pork. I don't care if it's catfish. I'm going to have some catfish. I don't care if it's offered to some idol. I'm going to eat it anyway. Where's God? I'm sitting here in this condition. I'm so many miles from home. Everybody I know is dead. My house is burned down. Do you think I care about what kind of sandwich I eat? He did care because God cared. And therefore, God blessed them. Not only does it bless them in the sense with physical health there, that 3 years they're there in that school, they wind up being 10 times wiser, smarter than all the other students that are there. In fact, when they come before the king, Nebuchadnezzar, and they're having basically what you and I would call oral exams, when he tests their knowledge, they are 10 times wiser than the men who taught them. They are brilliant. God has blessed them. That's point number one, lesson number one. You stay true to God no matter what the cost. And God will stay true to you no matter what the situation. when Jesus Christ gives his apostles the great commission to go into all the world, teach the gospel, Matthew 28, verse 18, down to the end of verse 20, he says, and lo, I am with you, when? Always, even to the end of the world. I know we can all quote that. I know we've all heard it all of our lives. Do you believe that? You're in the waiting room at ICU. Do you believe that? When you're at the kids' hospital and you got a little one in there having some surgery, do we believe that? When we've just lost a spouse, do we believe that? When the church is about to tear wide open over some idiotic doctrine that somebody won't let go because of pride, do we believe that? We've got to. We've got to understand that no matter what the situation is, it's not too strong for God or too hard for God to get us through. The only way you and I lose our souls, brethren, is to quit. Once you become a Christian, as long as you follow God, as long as you walk in the light, 1 John 1, verse 7, you are going to go to heaven. But if you quit, you're not. There's only one way that goes, Matthew 7, 13 and 14. Daniel and his friends show us how to stand up. Chapter 2 is another great chapter. And in chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. And in this dream, he dreams of a great image. Now, you're seeing in this material, God is revealing so much. Daniel chapter 2 is about the church of Christ. Daniel chapter 2 is about Jesus Christ. The entire Old Testament story. Don't get lost in the details. Genesis through Malachi is about Jesus. Genesis 1, creation of man. Genesis 2, more information on creation of man and woman. Genesis 3, man and woman sin. Genesis 3:15, Genesis 3, 8, 9, and 12, God pronounces a curse against the woman, a curse against the man, a curse against the devil, and then he comes to verse 15 and gives the first promise. Of the seed of woman, I will bring forth a son, a man, who will crush the head of the serpent. He repeats it in Isaiah 7, verse 15. Behold, a virgin shall be with child. And he goes through many things in Isaiah. Mighty Counselor, Prince of Peace, Lord of Lords, etc. All those things. This branch from the tribe of Judah. Jeremiah 31, 22. Behold, a woman shall encompass a man. A woman having a baby without a man being involved. Matthew 1, about verses 24 and following, the angel appears to Joseph and says, that thing which is in Mary is holy, it's from God. Luke 2, the angel appears to Mary. You're going to have a son. How can this be? I've never known a man. It's fulfilling all of this. Well, Daniel 2 is the same way. Daniel 2, God is giving us very key, time-specific elements to let the world know when the church is going to be established, when the kingdom of God would come. So he dreams this great image, and he wakes up. Have you ever had a dream? And the dream, it seems so real at the time you have it. And perhaps it scared you real bad. And you wake up and your heart's just beating. Boom, 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 boom. You're just scared to death. Or maybe you wake up, you're crying. Maybe it's a dream one of your kids dies or something bad happens. And you wake up and your face is wet. You're crying. In other words, you wake up and the emotion of the dream is still with you. But the details of the dream have faded. You ever had that happen? I think we probably all have. Where it upsets you and you knew it was very serious, but you can't remember. That's what happens to him. But he has a whole bunch of men in his country called soothsayers, wise men, astrologers, men who are supposed to be able to read the signs and interpret dreams. So he calls them to him and says, hey, I had a dream last night. I can't remember it. What's your name? Benjamin. I had a dream last night. What did I dream about? But he didn't know. There's no way he could know what was in my silly head last night while I was sleeping over the Hammond house. By the way, I highly recommend the Hammond Hotel. The lady who cooks there is a pretty good cook. So he says, tell me my dream. Tell me what I dreamed and the interpretation. And they say, King, nobody can do that. And he says, well, then, what am I feeding y'all for? What am I paying you for? Why do you have your houses? Your job is to give me this kind of information. Tell me the dream and the interpretation. And they say, well, we can't tell us the dream, then we'll give the interpretation. To which he basically says, if you can't tell me the dream, how can I have confidence in your interpretation, which is true? Like back in the day before call identification, Madame Cleo was on TV. You know, you could call Madame Cleo and she'd read your fortune for you. So you call the 800 number, she answers up, and she had that Jamaican accent. Yes, Mom, can I help you? What's your name? Well, how about you tell me, right? You're supposed to be the fortune teller. So same thing here, you know, they can't do it. Life is full of irony, and the older you get, the more of this you see. Have you ever noticed how sometimes a blessing can become a curse? I'll give you one quick example. Children. Oh, so sweet, so wonderful. 15 years later, I can't wait you out of my house or whatever, right? So they're a blessing, but they're a trial. Well, that's what the way chapter 1 ended was a blessing. Who are the 3 wisest men? Back to Daniel 2. When they still can't do it, he then passes a decree. All the wise men in all the land are going to be put to death. Who are the 4 wisest wise men in all the land? Remember, 10 times wiser. Who are they? Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. All of a sudden, this great blessing of this wisdom has become a curse. You ever get a big promotion at work? Oh, that's nice. Get the big desk with the good view and the big pay raise. And then what else comes with it? More work, more responsibility. All of a sudden, the company's not making much money. And it's not the guy who was your boss's fault anymore. Whose fault is it? It's your fault. Well, now all of a sudden, that great praise of being the wisest man has become a curse. So Daniel sends word through Arioch, the guy who's supposed to kill everybody. Ask the king, what's the hurry? We just got here. We just got this stuff figured out. Well, why the rash decree? He comes back and tells him. And Daniel says, well, we serve a God in heaven who can answer that dream for him. So he goes to Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar says to him, Daniel, Arioch says that you can interpret my dream. He says, well, I can, but let me tell you this up front. I am no wiser. I am in no way more special than anybody else on this earth. By the way, brethren, that's true of us in the church. There is one church only, Ephesians chapter 4, 4 through 8. There is one body of doctrine that's true. That is John 8:32. And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. John 17, what's the truth? Sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth, okay? The Lord's church is right, not because we're more intellectually gifted than the churches in town, but because we actually read and do what the Word of God says. We let God give us our instructions. So he tells Nebuchadnezzar, I'm not any smarter than the rest of them in any special way. And what you have asked, no man can do. No man can read your dreams from last night, and no man can interpret that. But there's a God in heaven who can, and I serve him. If you'll give me tonight, we'll pray about it, which they did, and here's the interpretation. What you dreamed, Nebuchadnezzar, was a great idol, a great image. It had a head of gold. It had a chest of silver. It had belly and thighs of brass. It had legs of iron. And toward the clay, it was iron, and it was miry clay. Well, that gets his attention, because that's what I dreamed. And then it says, here's the interpretation. What you have seen are 4 great kings. By the way, he said also, I'll get to this in a minute, 44. And in the days, he goes through the kingdoms. These are 4 kingdoms. The first kingdom is you, Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon. Now, my way of thinking, well, here's the interpretation. Babylon is the gold. The Medo-Persian Empire is the silver. Greece is the bronze. And then Rome is the iron. And it says in that Roman kingdom, the last kingdom, is very diverse to the rest of them. It's going to be very hard, very militaristic. It will conquer the whole world. But the imagery of the feet being iron, clay, kind of interspersed, they will be among the nations, but they won't mix with the nations. So they'll be partly strong and partly weak. There were always rebellions. See, my way of thinking, probably yours too, what's the greatest world empire that ever existed? Rome, right? Well, by the way, you understand that America, our principles, we're based on Greco-Roman concepts. Greece and Rome is where our, at least intellectual aspects of our governmental system come from. But in God's way of viewing things, Babylon's the greatest. Babylon's the greatest because Babylon didn't have to fight many wars. Nebuchadnezzar, that golden head, he's at peace for the most part. Really, the Medo-Persians, they conquer, but they're not destroyers. Darius and Cyrus the Great, they're actually great builders, great unifiers of ignorant pagan nations. They're actually pretty positive also. But Rome does it by might. The 760 years or so that Rome existed, less than 50 years of that almost 800 years were they not at war. They had a temple in Rome called the Temple of Janus, the god of war, and they would open those temple doors to let out fury and courage and strength that men need on the battlefield. Those doors stayed open during battle times. They were open almost 700 consecutive years. Rome conquered, but Rome fought to hold everything it had. Many a winter, Rome would lose every legion they had in certain countries to the winter and to winter invasion. But that's the 4 kingdoms. But the most important verse is 44. as he goes through the Roman discussion, he says, in the days of these kings, God shall raise up a kingdom, a stone, a rock that shall grind into dust all of the other kingdoms. And a kingdom which shall go forth from Zion, a kingdom that shall last forever. What's he hinting at? The church, clearly. So that's a timestamp. The Lord's church was supposed to come during the time of the Roman kings. You know, today you have a lot of folks. I'll just sum this up about 2 minutes, then I'll make a comment. So it's supposed to come in the days of the Roman kings. Isaiah 2 through 4, the kingdom would come to Zion, to Jerusalem. It would go forth first in Jerusalem, then the surrounding area, then to all the world. When Jesus shows up, why is Jesus born in Bethlehem? There's a reason that they're there. What was it? Census. What king had ordered the census? Octavius, the king of Rome, the Caesar of Rome. So you had to go to the town of University. So Rome is in control. What was the nationality of Pilate, the governor or the pontiff before whom Christ stood before his crucifixion? Roman. What was the nationality of the soldiers that drove the nails into the hands and feet of Jesus? Roman. So we are clearly in the time of the Iron Kingdom. The time is right. Mark 9 and verse 1, Jesus Christ says, there be some of you here this day who shall not taste of death until you see the kingdom come, and see the kingdom come with power. Mark 16, 13 and 14, while they're walking on the coast of Caesarea Philippi, Christ asked the disciples, who do men say that I am? They said, some say Jeremiah, some say Isaiah, some say John the Baptist, or one of the prophets. But whom say ye that I am? Peter says, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. To whom Christ then says, blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this unto thee, but my Father who is in heaven. And thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom. And whatsoever thou shalt bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatsoever thou shalt loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Christ gave him the keys of the kingdom. The foundational principle, that rock, which is Christ, before he dies in the book of Luke, before he leaves, he tells them, y'all abide in Jerusalem until you be endued with power on high. Acts chapter 2, while they're all gathered in one place, the 12 apostles, behold, the Holy Spirit falls upon them with the sound of a mighty wind, and the Holy Spirit falls upon them like cloven tongues. Christ has said, y'all stay there till you be endued with power. Mark 9 and verse 1 says, when the power comes, the kingdom comes. Matthew 16, 13 through 18, Peter has the keys of the kingdom. When the Holy Spirit falls on them, Peter and the 12 arise, and he opens the doors to the kingdom of Christ, to the church of our Lord. That's when it happens. Colossians 1 verse 23, Christ is head of the church. Colossians 1 verse 18, the church which is the body. Ephesians 4 and verse 4. There is one body all the way through. We have all the timelines, all the elements. The kingdom, the king, and the church are the same thing. They're rolled into one. It all happens during the time of these Roman kings. I said that to say this. All these premillennialists, every time a firecracker goes off in the Middle East, oh, it's the end of time. Oh, the signs are here. Oh, no, oh. When I was a kid, Hal Lindsey was getting rich writing books about the end of time. His most famous one was called 88 Reasons Why Jesus Christ Will Return in 1988. Well, guess what? That's a few years ago, wasn't it, Chris? And here we sit. Christ himself in Matthew 24 makes it very clear, of that day and of that time, no man knows, not even the Son of God. Well, here in the flesh, he didn't even know what it's going to be. But over and over and over again, he just says, you be ready, you be ready, you stay ready. So Daniel 2, again, that's just kind of a throw-in lesson, but Daniel 2 also falsifies the concept of premillennialism. That, oh, Jesus Christ is going to come back and establish his kingdom. That's not the case. In fact, when he had that Lord's Supper with his apostles, he tells them, I will not eat this again with you till I do so in the kingdom, which he does later after the church is established, after he resurrects. All right, back to chapter 2. So when this all takes place, Nebuchadnezzar is blown away, as we would be. He elevates Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to the top positions in the country. And he gives them, and by the way, first he's going to elevate Daniel, and Daniel says, not just me, but also my friends. It's very, very easy. They prayed for me too. It's very, very easy to forget those who help you on the way up. Don't be that kind of person. Be somebody who's very considerate, who's very appreciative. Most of us stand on the shoulders of someone who went before. You know, someone else laid the foundation. Someone else did the hard work. Somebody else got things going. This building, I don't know where any of y'all are alive when they built this building. Some of y'all may have been, some of you may not have been. But the point is, most of us attend in buildings that we didn't build. You know, we have access to works that we didn't necessarily start. So be very thankful for those who went before and did what they did do with what they had. All right, chapter 3. This becomes a theme as well. When people see you living differently than them, it bothers them. I never understood why that is. I still really don't. But say you work somewhere, and on the 4th of July, they're going to have a company picnic. And at the company picnic, they've got beer. And they know you're a Christian, you don't drink. I'm going to ask you boys a question. Those of y'all who work at places like that, does that keep them from offering you a beer? They'll offer you a beer every time. Every time. No, I don't drink. Year after year after year. Come on, no, I'm not. If something about you not doing what they're doing, it bothers them. Now, I don't know why that is, but I know that it is. I know that Christ says this, men who love darkness, what'd you say next? Hate the light. We're going to talk about the passion of Christ next hour. When it comes to his crucifixion, they crucified him. He didn't do anything wrong. They just didn't like what he was saying. These people hate Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel. So in chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar, he has another whim. I like Nebuchadnezzar, by the way. I hope to see him in heaven. I don't know. We'll get to chapter 4 in a minute. You're going to see there's some good things about Nebuchadnezzar. But chapter 3 is not one of them. In chapter 3, he builds a big idol. So I don't know if he builds this idol because of the dream he had. I don't know what it is, but it's some big image, okay? It's golden. It's about 60 feet by 20 feet, big old thing, and it's there to be worshiped. He says, when I play certain kinds of music, I want all of y'all, it's 90 by 18, the dimensions. I want all of y'all to fall down, I think it's 60 cubits, which is 18 inches, so that's 90 feet. But anyway, he says, I want y'all to fall down and worship this image. So they put the image up, they play all this music at the elect time, everybody bows down except for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Now, I'm going to assume, my assumption, that Daniel wasn't in town. And I say that because of what happens in Daniel 6. Exact same scenario. He won't praise Darius as a king, and he does go to the lion's den. So there's nothing in the Bible that condemns him for doing it, but he's not mentioned. Those three guys don't bow. Well, there's a bunch of tattletales. There's always tattletales. There's always somebody going to bring it up. Always somebody who's going to out you as being a Christian. So they say, hey, didn't you, and they set the king up. Nebuchadnezzar, didn't you say that when you played the music, all your faithful servants were to bow down before your idol? Well, yeah. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego didn't do it. And by the way, he had also said there was a penalty of death. You'll be thrown into a fiery furnace if you don't do it. I don't know why, and our government does the same thing, why sometimes men in power feel compelled to express their power over you. He had to know it wasn't the kind of thing that everybody was going to do. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had to put the death penalty on it. So he knew even his Babylonian servants weren't necessarily going to willingly bow down before that idol. So it says, when somebody says you do this or else, automatically you need to look at that pretty close. So he calls them in. Again, these are men of honor, good men. He respects them to a degree because he gives them a second chance. He says, maybe y'all didn't understand. When I play this kind of music, I'm serious. Y'all will bow before my image or you're going to go in that fiery furnace. I love the response. Verse 16. O King Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful in answering you upon this matter, for we serve a God who is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace. I love this next part. But whether he does or whether he doesn't, we will not bow. That gives me chills every time I read it. And by the way, keep in mind, brethren, they didn't have Daniel 3 written out. They're living this in real time. For all they know, they're going to be French fries here in just a minute. They're going to be thrown in there and burned up. But they have no clue how this thing's going to end. But you know what they do know? They don't know if God's going to help them or not. But they do know this. They're not going to sin against God. You've got to have that mentality. Some of y'all, as old as some of y'all are, I'm sure you have lost some jobs or some business deals because you would not do something that was unscrupulous or against the ethic of God or Christ. And you know what? That's just the price you pay. It's better to eat bologna and beans all of your life than it is to compromise your principles and compromise God. Because this world is but a fleeting moment. James 4, verse 13 through 17. Our life's but a vapor, and we're going to stand before God real soon. They wouldn't bow. So then Nebuchadnezzar gets mad, has them tied up in their clothes, has them thrown in the furnace. He has it heated 7 times this normal heat. Now, this normal heat was sufficient to bake bricks. Seems to be a fire kill for big bricks. So they throw them in. The valiant, the mighty soldiers that throw them in, they die from the heat. It's so overheated, it kills the men who threw them in. He gets around where he can kind of apparently look over in there, and when he sees in there, he says, hey, didn't we throw 3 men tied up in the fire? Yes, sir. Behold, I see 4, and the 4th one looks like the Son of God. I don't know who that was. I don't know if it's some kind of pre-incarnate appearance of Jesus. I don't know if it's an angel. There's a 4th body of somebody in there with them, and they're not burned. Their hair's not singed, and they don't smell like smoke. They came out of the furnace this morning. Sister Hammond cooked sausage and eggs. If you sniff us real close, you probably smell a little bit of sausage on our clothes. But there's no smoke on them. And when I grill burgers, I can't do it without burning all the hair off my forearms. I don't know about you guys. It always flares up and gets me. No hair singed, no smell of smoke. God delivered them. They come out, and then Nebuchadnezzar, and I love Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar reminds me of a pagan Peter. He's very up and down in his service with God. But once he sees this, he says, hey, nobody can talk bad about their God. There's no God like their God. And so they stand up, they do the right thing, and people take notice. I think I heard a verse somewhere, maybe Matthew 5:13 through 16. You are the salt of the earth. You're like a city set upon a hill that cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle, put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and gives light to the whole house. Verse 18, you do these things, and you glorify your Father, and when men see your good works, they too will glorify the Father. Everybody says the right thing until the temptation comes up, until the pressure's applied. Solid Christians will stand up in these kind of times. Chapter 4 is a very unique chapter. It is written by Nebuchadnezzar. The words of Nebuchadnezzar are penned for us. He basically says, let me tell you what the God of heaven did to me. How he showed me, this is the last verse, last section we'll get to this morning. But he shows me that God's in control. That's the reason we use this text. And that God gives the kingdoms of men to whomsoever he sees fit. He says, behold, I had a dream. And it's the same scenario. He remembers the dream this time. Nobody can interpret it. He gets Daniel there. Daniel says, when he says he dreamed of a great tree, huge tree, lots of leaves. All the animals ate the fruit and the leaves that fell from the tree. And the birds lived in the nest of the tree. But then an angel screamed out, a herald said, cut the tree down and put an iron and brass band around the base of the tree. Shake the leaves off and throw it down. Daniel, what's that mean? For an hour, Daniel said nothing. By this time, Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar are pretty good friends. He's been there for decades. Daniel, tell me the dream. You're going to have that talk. Someone's going to ask you, are you saying that I am lost? I brought one of the tracts I brought is entitled, are members of the Church of Christ the only ones going to heaven? You need to get that and read that tract. Because that question is going to be asked to you. You need to be able to answer that question. For an hour, he sat quiet. And again, Nebuchadnezzar says, Daniel, tell me the dream. Friends, when you get to that point, they need to hear the truth. He says, oh, Nebuchadnezzar, I wish that this interpretation was against your enemies and not you. Daniel, tell me the dream. Okay, fine. He says, you are the tree. And because of your pride, God will cut you down. And you're going to be for 7 seasons like a beast in the field eating grass. Then he says, unless you repent, and maybe God will show you mercy. Don't be arrogant. Don't be prideful. Take care of the poor. Stop being the way you've been being. 12 months later, we're told a year later, he's walking on the walls of Babylon. Depending on the depiction you look at, the walls are roughly 90 feet tall. They're wide enough. They have chariot races, 3 or 4 chariots abreast, riding the walls, 120 towers where archers could shoot that are over 100 feet tall each. Massive, massive structure. They had the hanging gardens of Babylon. They planted trees and plants on the roofs. Beautiful city. He walks along saying, behold, my Babylon, which I have built for my glory with my hands. And while the words are still on his lips, God speaks. Cut the tree down. And for 7 seasons, I don't know, 7 years, however long it was, his hair grows long like either eagle's feathers. His fingernails get long like bird claws. And he says, at the end of the seasons, my reasoning returned to me. And behold, I knew there was a God in heaven
who gives the kingdoms of men to whomsoever he sees fit. Those 9 judges on the Potomac River are not in control of your life. Whoever wins or loses the presidential election, that is not what controls your life and mine. We serve God. We are citizens of another kingdom. Our focus is on spiritual matters more so than physical anyway. It doesn't matter. The physical things are temporary anyway. Christ told us in Matthew 6, verse 19, lay not up for yourselves treasure on the earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, where thieves break through and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, where thieves do not break through and steal. We're all running toward our expiration date. You know, there's one out there. There's a calendar out there with your name on it and mine, when we will be no more. What happens after that's what matters. All we're doing now is just picking our next destiny, whether it's going to be with God or against God. So again, he passes, again, he elevates these men. He learns his lesson. Chapter 5, you have his son who has a drunken feast, and he's with the vessels from the temple. And at that time, he calls Daniel in. You have the handwriting on the wall. That's where we get that statement, by the way. Mene, tekel, upharsin. Thou art weighed in the balances and found wanting. God hath numbered your kingdom. It's over. And tonight your kingdom goes to the Medes and Persians. Chapter 6, Darius, the great Persian king, had come in. They get in there and begin to brag on him. Daniel is the first president of the 4 presidents. They're jealous about him. They say, we can't get him on his character. Let's get him on his religion. Same thing. We can only praise Darius for a month. Daniel opens his windows, bows down and prays. He ain't hiding his faith. They throw him in the lion's den. By the way, Darius, much different character than Nebuchadnezzar. When Daniel is thrown in, he's mad at himself, not mad at Daniel. He prays all night, fasts all night, goes down in the morning. Daniel, has your God delivered you? I'm fine. The angels stay the lions. He then takes him out, and then he throws all the accusers in, and the lions kill them. Over and over again, you stay with God, God stays with you. Brethren, if we don't get that point from Daniel, we've missed the whole point of it. Thank you. Our time is up.